Hello there everybody, Sam Strains here, welcome back to the railway. Right, the other day a funny video idea just hit me out of the blue and I thought to myself, yeah, I'm doing that one. So here they come, it is Britain's ugliest locomotives. First of all then, before any of you try to hunt me down and kill me over this video, I should say that there is no hate from me towards any of these locomotives in today's video. In fact, I would say that probably all but one of them are among my favourites, which is quite worrying actually. Does that mean that I'm super attracted to ugly things? I don't know, it's best not to think about it. Also, no hate towards any of the manufacturers that produced any of today's locomotives. Of course, the models are only ugly because the things in real life were ugly, so that is fair enough. And finally, of course, if you disagree that any of today's models are ugly, then please, that is fine. Let me know down in the comments which ones they were. And more importantly, if you can think of any particular locos that you just think, they're disgusting. Also, let me know down in the comments which ones they were and why, and I might consider doing a part 2 for this. So the locos in today's video, some of them are based on comments, people saying these are ugly. If I've noticed a lot of comments saying that, they're in this video. Sometimes some of them are just based on my opinion, so that's fine. Some of them might be a surprise, or hopefully not a nasty surprise and not one that will get me killed. And some of them are just locomotives that everybody agrees are quite ugly, and we're actually going to start off with one of those. We're starting out safe just so that the murderous people can finish and have their little fussy and then go away before some of the more controversial choices turn up. So let me show you what I've got set up and let's get started with some of Britain's ugliest locomotives. So I've already set up some consists for our ugly engines to come and haul. I don't think they really give any clues. Maybe those southern coaches might be a bit of a clue. But over on the turntable here are the first few ugly locomotives of the day. What do you reckon? Do you agree that these are ugly? I think most people will agree that at least one of these locos is. And it is, of course, this one. This is the Oliver Bulleid Southern Q1 locomotive. And again, definitely no hate to this one because it is one of my all-time favourite locomotives. But you have to admit they're ugly brutes, aren't they? And there is a really good reason for that. These were built slap bang in the middle of World War II. I mean, obviously looks were right down at the bottom of the list when these were built. No, these were built for efficiency, they were built to be cheap, and they truly are a product of austerity, aren't they? And I've heard these called all sorts of things, ugly ducklings. People say they look like a telescopic spyglass or something. Yeah, they are pretty weird looking, but that is probably why a lot of people do actually like these, because they're just so unique, aren't they? Anyway, I'll tell you a little bit about the Q1s as we get her coupled up to one of the trains over there on the scenic section. Anyway, so a bit more on the actual Q1s in real life then. So these were designed by Oliver Bulleid and they appeared in 1942 as a class of austerity freight locomotives which went on to be used heavily during and after the Second World War. Although the class was not attractive, as I've explained, the engines were extremely efficient and powerful and they were considered the ultimate design of 060 locomotive, at least in this country. The Q1s easily hauled trains which were usually only suitable for much larger engines, and I've tried to sort of show that here today. It's quite a big train for a little 060, and this combined with their relatively light weight made them pretty perfect for all manner of different duties and routes. A total of 40 were built during 1942, although sadly the only one that remains in preservation is C1. Alright, coming in for the coupling. Wow, look at that. Such good models, man. They might be ugly as sin, but they sure run well. My goodness. Okay, here we go. Can they handle the train? Or can it handle the train? Yes, it can. There we go. So the Q1, ladies and gentlemen. And I've always been absolutely fascinated by the Q1. They represent a complete change in what the railways meant. I mean, before the war, they were all about the elegance, the speed, the power. The locos were either the biggest, the most powerful, the best looking, the most famous, blah, blah, blah. But then when the war came along, they weren't about any of this anymore. It was just literally about getting the job done. It wasn't even about making money anymore. It was literally a matter of keeping the country going, keeping the country alive. So these Q1s are absolutely fascinating, and there are other locomotives obviously built around this time, but the Q1 represents this the best, I think, because it just looks so completely alien and so completely unlike the beautiful steam locomotives that went before it. And I think that is the thing that a lot of people find really attractive about these Q1s. You know, they're not putting on any airs, are they? They're not trying to look like anything they're not. They're not trying to convince anybody that the railways are the way to go. No, they just are what they are, and they do what they do pretty darn well. And so yes, they might be ugly on the outside, but they represent quite a lot more than that. So yeah, easily probably my favourite locomotive of the day today. And I've started with it, so it's all downhill from here. Oh well, never mind. Back to the turntable now then for the next ugly locomotive. The next one I've chosen is this. It is the Sentinel. Now I think there is a reasonable case to be made for these locos not being super ugly. I think they do have a little bit of that cute factor to them, don't they, as a result of their size. And in fact the O-gauge version of this model is one of the best I've ever seen. However, because of their sort of boxy look and their bland liveries and the lack of outside motion, etc, etc, they're not the most interesting and pleasant thing to look at, are they? And to be honest, I'm not really that keen on this particular model either. But yeah, you stand this next to a handsome Princess Royal class or something like that, and hopefully you can see at least where I'm coming from with this one. So a little bit of history on the Sentinels then. Let me get this off the turntable and onto the layout, and we'll get it running a bit of a train. So in real life then, the Sentinel steam shunters were built by the Sentinel Wagon Works, which were a multifaceted company who produced lorries, diesel locomotives, buses and steam shunters. The Sentinel steam locomotives used the same boilers that their lorries used, which I find quite interesting, a variety of which were produced over many years. The LNER had several units built in the form of the Class Y3 and Y1 locomotives, which were introduced in the mid-1920s. The Sentinels were also used in several other different applications in various industries, and at least one that resembles this type of Sentinel shunter has been preserved. It's one of the LNER Y1s and it resides at the Middleton Railway. Okay, steadily does it. Although with this loco there really is no other way. There's no real way to be rough with this loco, even if you're trying to be. I mean, that is 60% speed, although it might as well not be because it's not coupled. Yeah, there's something wrong with the motor in this for some reason. I'm not sure what. I'm pretty sure it never used to be as slow as this. That's 70% speed. And there's always been issues with this. I mean, straight out of the box it screeched like a banshee. Now it appears there's something wrong with the motor, but do you know what? It's okay. But it does work. It does work as a shunter. I suppose that's the main thing. There we go. That's a little bit better. Let it run for a little while and it'll speed up. For that is the Dapol way. That's true, isn't it, actually? Why is that true of so many Dapol locos? Strange. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, that's more than presentable now, isn't it? Nice little wagon train with the new Oxford 12 tons sneakily at the front of the train, because I'm quite proud of those. And there's some older tankers behind it, but most of those are quite nice modern ones. Yeah. So what do we think to the Sentinel then? Does everybody agree that this is an ugly locomotive? I think it's certainly less ugly than the Q1, isn't it? So perhaps you'll have an easier time convincing me that this one is nice looking than you would the Q1. But no, at the moment, yeah, I think it's a box with moving wheels, isn't it? Again, I mean, that does make them quite endearing, doesn't it, I suppose? I mean, they just don't look like normal steam locomotives, and that in itself is a point of interest, isn't it? But overall, no, I think they're ugly buggers, aren't they, really? Particularly in this sort of weird grey/green livery. But I tell you what, if I had the choice again, buy the model or leave it in the shop, I'd still buy it because it's just one of those interesting little locos to run. So yeah, it might not be the most handsome, nicest looking loco in the world, but I'm glad to own one, that's for sure. And as you can see, for a tiny little thing, it's handling those wagons all right, no trouble at all. So there you go, that is the Sentinel. Let's move on. All right, 2 engines left around the turntable. One of them is part of the video, the other one is not. Which shall it be? Well, It's this one. It is the LMS Garratt. Now, when I first reviewed this, I didn't consider this an ugly locomotive, really. I thought it's very strange and unusual, but I wouldn't have called it ugly. But this is one of those locos that when I show it, people do come along in the comments and say, oh, blimey, they're ugly locos, aren't they? And I suppose the more I look at it, the more I can see where they're coming from with that. I mean, obviously, this is not a conventional looking steam locomotive, is it? It's not made clearly to look particularly handsome. You've got that horrible automatic coal shoveling machine, or whatever it's called. The boiler and smoke box, usually the handsome front of a locomotive, is boxed into the middle between the coal bunkers and the water tanks. Yeah, it's an odd one, isn't it? So while I didn't really think of this as an ugly locomotive, it seems a lot of other people do, and I can't really blame them for it. However, there's a more pressing matter than whether or not this is ugly, and that is the fact that it has to cross over the turntable to get to its train. I don't think I've ever done this on the turntable before. Obviously, it can't ride on the turntable because it's much too long, but I expect there will probably be an issue with this. Right, let's see how we get on with this. If this goes well, I don't know. Well, I won't say I'll eat my hat, because then if it goes well, I'll have to eat my hat. But waffling aside, let's give this a go. Try and keep it steady. I'll be very impressed if it does this. Wow, I am most impressed with that. When I first bought this Garratt, I heard a lot of stories about these failing and being bad runners and such. Say what you like about Helgen, and much of it will be true, but I've not yet had a problem with this Garratt. It runs absolutely beautifully. Okay, attempt to coupling. Difficult with this Garratt because it's a really rubbish crawler. I mean, that's literally as slow as it can go. But yeah, I've gone for the cheapo AliExpress wagons because there's quite a lot of them, and it just lets the Garratt stretch its legs a bit. If indeed it can couple. The front wagon has got a sort of tension lock NEM coupling on it, just like the Garratt does, but no, it's not playing ball, so I'm just going to crawl along, see what's going on with this. Come on, flipping heck. There we are, it's done it now by hand. Make sure the hooks are engaged. Okay, try again. Here we go then with the Garratt. A little bit more on the Garratts then. So the first LMS Garratts were ordered from Bayer Peacock Company, and they were built in 1927. The LMS decided to employ such huge locomotives, it's a 260 plus 260 I believe, due to the fact that they had previously double or even triple headed locomotives in order to shift those larger trains, which obviously was quite uneconomical, running 3 locomotives for one service. Unbelievably, the LMS insisted that their standard design of axle box were to be used on the Garratts, which is insane because they didn't even work properly on the 4Fs, let alone anything 10 times the size, and therefore they became a key point of failure on the Garratts. A total of 33 were built for heavy freight duties between 1927 and 1930, and they had relatively short working lives because by the end of 1955, withdrawal was well underway, and the final example had been withdrawn and scrapped by 1958 with no survivors. There are other Garratts that did survive, but not any LMS ones. Well, there you have it then, folks, my first 3 ugly locomotives. What do you think so far? Are you surprised by any of the picks? Are you furious over any of the picks? I mean, these days that's a very real possibility, isn't it? No, I do think there is an argument to be made for all of these being ugly. And there's also an argument to be made for them all being rather impressive and handsome. So I won't say any more on the subject, I will just let you guys be the judge. However, I mean, I'm having a good time. I'm enjoying running them, and they're all working well. So overall, no complaints at all from me. However, we've only seen 3 locomotives so far. There are plenty more ugly ones still to come. So I think I will take these off now, and we'll get some of the others out and see if they can do any worse. Well, we'll find out. Here we go. So here comes another ugly locomotive then, and again, no hate on this at all. This is one of my absolute favourite classes. It is the West Country class, although again, many people do consider these ugly, although of course their attractiveness hides in other areas, the interesting mechanical design, their efficiency, and probably their uniqueness as well. So yeah, I would say this is one of my firm favourite classes of locomotive. It is the West Country class, Battle of Britain, whatever you want to call it, Light Pacifics they're called. They were introduced in 1945 by Oliver Bulleid. So these two classes, in inverted commas, they were identical and they resembled a lighter version of the successful Merchant Navy class, which enabled them to cover a better variety of routes. The first batch was known as the West Country and the remaining 70 or so were known as Battle of Britain, so it's only really time that separates them. The class became known for its unusual look, partly due to that air-smoothed casing. I think that's the key to their ugliness, really, isn't it? The casing had several purposes: to make cleaning easier, so the loco could be washed like a coach, and it also served as a kind of smoke deflector, a giant one which draws smoke up away from the cab. Now the casing was not intended for streamlining, as many seem to think it was. In fact, if you look at it, it's quite un-aerodynamic, isn't it? Now during the early 1950s, 60 of the class were rebuilt by British Railways, and the products of this rebuilding actually featured no air-smooth casing, which actually reduced their ugliness quite significantly. They were quite handsome. 10 of the class remain in preservation, and the remainder sadly were scrapped. Okay, so this next one is a little bit of a tricky one. I've never heard this one described as an ugly locomotive, but when I was going through my collection trying to decide what to pick for this running session, it did catch my eye and I thought, yeah, you know what, that looks really alien. It's a really odd looking design. It's a big oblong locomotive. There's no pony or bogie at the front or back to balance the thing out. Yeah, it just looks really odd and bizarre, doesn't it? Quite handsome in its own way, and again, I would say that this is a locomotive I really like. But yeah, the G2A, in my opinion, is ugly. If you want to try and dissuade me from that, if you want to try and convince me otherwise, please do so in the comments. Anyway, these G2As were one of many powerful classes of 080 locomotives, very strange wheel configuration, designed for the LNWR. And these were a development of the earlier G1 class, which were built around the turn of the 20th century. The class was designed by Charles Bowen Cooke, and 327 examples existed in total, all of which were rebuilt from the older G1 design. The class served for many years, and 320 of the locos survived well into the BR era, which of course is the vast majority of the original class. Sadly, none of the G2As were preserved, but there is a G2, I believe, which is very similar looking, but technically not identical. So all of the ugly engines and things I've shown you today have been steam ones, but this is one that just has to be in any list of ugly locomotives. I've never had so many comments berating and mocking and throwing hate at any class of locomotive, steam, diesel, electric, solar powered or otherwise, than this. So this is the Pacer. It was also known as the BR. Why do people hate these? I guess they just look like buses, don't they, on rails. Were they Leyland buses? I went on a Leyland bus every day to school, and trust me, it was not a pleasant experience. Anyway, these Pacers, yeah, they were known as the BR Class 144. They were produced in the mid to late 1980s, and they were introduced in order to replace some of the early and ageing British DMUs. Poor replacement, many people argue. So the Pacers proved to be more reliable and more efficient than the DMUs they replaced, and they could be found in Yorkshire or thereabouts. So, I mean, say what you like, they did kind of do the job. Most Pacers are still in operation today, although a refurbishment program did take place in the early 2000s and then again in 2010. So they're not going anywhere soon, which is a pity. God, that Pacer of mine really is starting to look like a proper old banger, isn't it? I've just noticed that the lighting strips have come unstuck from the ceiling, so they're sort of dangling down. Yeah, I mean, the condition of that is really bringing back spooky memories of my school days, going to school on a Leyland bus. Oh, not an experience I would recommend or care to repeat, but fond memories, I suppose. The most horrible times are always the fondest, aren't they? I don't know why that is. Anyway, so there you go. The ugliest locomotives. I don't know, in my collection, I did look over the whole collection and picked some that were rather ugly. I tried not to go with the obvious ones, obviously beyond the Q1. The Q1 could not have been omitted, could it really? Otherwise people would just be on at me in the comments. So that had to be there. But yeah, like I say, if there are any locos that you think should have been in this video because they're super ugly, do of course let me know down in the comments. I was considering I was considering quite a lot of other locos, diesels being among them, but I won't tell you what those are. I'll wait and see if their names crop up a lot in the comments and such. But I hope you enjoyed the running session. I mean, I really have had fun running these engines. It just proves that looks aren't everything, doesn't it? Because, yeah, they are lovely locos to run. All of them, actually, have been really good runners today. Lots of good behaviour. I don't think I've seen a single derailment. Yeah, no complaints at all. What a lot of fun that was. So thank you for watching. Do let me know down in the comments if you enjoyed the running session, and of course I will do more. Thank you again, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers, folks.